All right, everyone. Welcome back to the Grace Accept Evolve podcast. How you doing today, James?
I am fantabulous.
I feel like that's gonna be our regular intro. It's just like very every time that's how we're gonna start it. I
Right.
love it though.
How about
Um,
yourself, Ray? How are you?
yeah, like I was saying before we jumped on the podcast today, it's been a very kind of productive day. I did some yoga this morning, some work. I would have liked to maybe journaled and things like that. I would like to get back into my morning routine, but it's slowly but surely going in that way. Words are hard today. I don't know what's going on as I'm saying my sentences, but it's going, and I'm really happy. I feel very happy getting back into my routine. That's been
Mm,
nice. So, um, but yeah, how's your day going so far? Besides
yeah.
fantabulous.
Well, it's kind of going in that similar fashion, in a sense. Well, let me start out by saying as well to the audience members, there's construction happening next door. They are, um, yeah, working on a fence with some hammers and tools and nails and all those other construction materials. So if you hear any banging around during this episode, that's what that is. And so I'm feeling so first I'll start out by saying Thursday, everyone, is the fall equinox. And obviously by the time this episode comes out, that day shall have passed. But this upcoming Thursday when we're recording is 9/22, which is the fall equinox. And in some of the previous episodes, Rhea had talked about how I've been in tune with the seasons this year. And
Yeah.
so like I'm starting to feel that culmination of being active all summer and in the spring and kind of slow things down, or like you were saying, give space to return to some type of routine or normalcy, or just really just slow down. So I'm
Yeah.
almost kind of, yeah, ready to slow down and yeah, chill out a little bit for the fall. So that's where I'm
Nice.
at. That's where I'm at.
Yeah, I love the fall, and me and somebody that's in my life, he put it perfectly. He's like, I come alive during the fall. And I was like, that's how I feel. When
Mm,
the weather starts to cool down, that's when I want to like start my car and like go on road trips, go camping, be outside. Like
right.
it's my favorite season is the fall.
Oh
But
wow.
but
Yeah.
I will agree, like even though you say like your life is slowing down, I feel like that could be really accurate, even though I was kind of listing all the things that I'm getting back into. It's all very introspective. It's all very more to myself and like with me and not community activities or just like, oh, I got to go over here and go over there. It's almost like I have more space for my routine because my life is slowing down and I can get back into the yoga and get back into, and I was sharing with James before the episode started. Yesterday I went back to jujitsu, which I
Mm.
haven't done jujitsu since like June ish. Like maybe I went to 4 classes in June and July,
Mm-hmm.
but I've been out for like a solid 3 months or so. So that was interesting in and of itself. And I plan to start classes again this week and see how long I can hold up in the fighting world again. So I'm excited though. I really, oh my gosh, I could cry thinking about how much I miss my jujitsu friends and that community. So I'm excited about that. I really am.
Sweet, sweet, sweet. Now, do you want to go even further into talk more about like the whole like how it came about, or how it was the breakaway from it, and then now we're turning back to it, or shall we just move into a specific topic, or move on to something
Yeah,
different?
I don't mind like touching on it for just a few minutes. It may not be like a whole episode, but
Right.
I definitely do feel like back then I was experiencing some frustrations, and some
Mm,
frustrations had built up over time with the sport and even maybe some individuals within the sport as well.
mhm.
And I'm usually pretty good at being vocal about my concerns, and actually this will go really well into what I wanted to talk about today potentially.
Okay. Yeah.
But jiu-jitsu has been something that I've been doing. It'll be in November. It'll be 3 years I've been doing it. And I've noticed with time, if certain conversations aren't had, I will literally let things build up to the point where I will just walk away from something.
Hmm.
And then I'm left with feeling regret, or mostly regret, when I look back on the situation. It's like, oh, I could have communicated these things, I could have
Mm.
talked about these things, or I could have just taken my space and then it wouldn't have ended that way. And it's a common theme in my life. So I ended up having some conversations that weren't as well received. And so I took a break, and they had to do with like communication things, like personal things, as well as like physical things as well. And they just weren't, we weren't meshing. It wasn't going. So I needed a break. I wanted to see if I missed the sport, or if I could do this, or if I could take a
Mm.
step back from the sport and keep my relationships. And that was hard. Like, me and one of my best friends, we had very sporadic meetings, but it's not to the degree that I want to have them. And with other friends in the sport in that community as well. So it's a little bit of both. Like, I do like the sport, but I love my friends more. And so I'm willing to re-enter the space and see if my passion for the sport can come back so that I can have that community. Like, I really miss my friends. Like, yeah, it's just been it's been hard. And I will say I've been thinking about it off and on for 2 months. So it wasn't
Mm.
something I just was like, hey, let me go take another class. Like, I sat with it. I let myself miss it. I let myself feel all the feelings, and also I let myself see if I could do without those relationships. And I cannot. At least not at this stage of my life, nor do I want to, but sometimes we got to do that, you
Uh,
know? Just to see what we're hanging on to. Is it bringing value to our life? And I truly believe if you take a step back, or what I've learned from this experience is, um, if you can let something go and you still miss it and you still see the benefits, it could be worth re-entering. But if you don't, sometimes I think people are afraid to see that. And I was, but I still tried. So
mm.
so I feel better about re-entering the space, really, because I know what I'm going back for in a lot of ways without questioning all of that anymore. So
Beautiful, beautiful, beautiful.
yeah.
Very beautiful. Beautiful. And so how does that segue into, well, I guess I'll piggyback on that a bit too. Of one of the things that definitely stick out for me in the past couple of years is community, and like where being very clear about where my community is, who my community is, or the type of frequency within the people I surround myself with, and so forth and so on. And so that's, yeah, that's been a nice feeling as well too, is kind of like it says, we come full circle, or switch seasons that go into this, even this new season with more clarity about activities and behaviors and engage, ways that I engage myself with, people and places and activities. So yeah, I definitely feel like a full circle moment with more clarity. Yeah.
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 Yeah. And before we get into like why I say that's a good segue for what I want to talk about today, I'm feeling like inspired to just pause for a second, and maybe ask ourselves, like, what communities are we a part of? Are they still serving us? Like, are you a part of a community at all? I actually know a few people in my life that I say in certain ways to them, like, I think you need some friends. And like, I don't mean that in a mean way, but sometimes people that are very like to themselves and introverted and don't have friends, they like to, I just notice a pattern that they talk to me a lot. And it's because I like to be available, and I like to talk to people about what's going on with them. But it also, when I'm on the phone for 3 hours, I'm like, I'm not sure that you have a lot of other people to talk to right now. And that's sad to me. That, and also sometimes I'm not interested in the same thing that they are, but I've done a better job over the years. I'm not perfect at it, but I do believe in community. All that to say, I'm not trying to be rude and be like, hey, you need some friends. It's more like, I really see value in that. And that's why I'm returning to that space, because I really felt a hole in my life
Mm.
by not having that community and not having those friendships. They bring different parts and aspects to you. Whereas also if you just say like, oh, my boyfriend's my best friend, that's awesome that you have that relationship. For me, it's almost not enough sometimes. Like it's good to have people that can support you in different areas of your life. So
Mhm.
yeah. Um I know why you're smiling. So James is
Right.
smiling because is it because of the hammer or whatever?
Yeah,
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 yeah.
yeah. They're
It's
just going
okay.
to town over there. Yeah, but
Yeah,
go
yeah.
ahead.
Um,
I'm listening.
so
Over here.
when I was talking about allowing certain things to annoy me and not speaking up about it, and I realized those are things that make me leave situations. I feel like James knows, not a lot of other people know, but I have a new relationship in my life and romantic relationship, boyfriend. There we go, boyfriend. And some people have found it very interesting, something that we do, and I don't know if I've told you about it yet, James. So we so far we've been dating like a couple months, and each month so far we've made like a dinner, and then we ask each other questions. We say, what am I doing that you enjoy, and what am I doing that you like that you would want a little bit more of? Like we don't use negative language, but it's like a check-in once a month that we're doing. It may become more frequent as the relationship progresses and as we get to know each other more, and as things become more on autopilot a little bit more.
Mhm.
But I got that idea from a podcast like years ago on the Tim Ferriss show. And I feel like why I felt like it's a good segue is because like things just start to go under the radar, and we do start to push things down in relationships and friendships, or even within our communities that we don't speak up about because we're like, maybe I'm nitpicking, or maybe today's not a good day for someone. We're having a good day. Maybe I shouldn't bring this up. And so a lot of tension builds up, a lot of like feelings around it. The story gets bigger.
Mhm.
And then sometimes when we have issues, you just realize this issue has been festering in the relationship and the friendship and the community for so long that it sometimes you just want to give it up instead of working through it and having the hard conversation. So lately, me and my boyfriend, we've decided this is going to be a standard in our relationship to make each other. We're just going to make a dinner together, sit down, just talk about our relationship, ask each other questions, make sure that we're both being fulfilled and supported. And our first, well, and I say I brought
Hey
this.
Ray, can I pause you for a second?
Sure.
I'm gonna go talk. I'm just gonna go mention to this next person next door that I'm recording something for like the next 40 minutes and see if they could work on another part of the because it
Okay. Do you want to
is
pause the recording? You can
yeah, I'm gonna
pause it.
pause it right now. Yep.
What did they say?
All right. So welcome back everyone. So actually we just took a pause of the calls and actually very in alignment with what we were just talking about, Ray.
Mm.
Like I mentioned before, I had some construction happening right next door. And so when Ray was trying to talk before, I just kept hearing that pounding, pounding, pounding. And all I could think about is this popping up in the audio to be edited or just this repeat boom, 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 boom. But anywho, so we paused the episode and I went next door and asked him if he could, hold off on the construction for the next 45 minutes or so. And he was more than happy to do so and gave me a fist pound. So,
Very
yeah.
nice. Very cool.
And there we are having conversations
There we go.
and
Very
addressing
nice.
topics.
Good
Yeah.
job, James. Congratulations.
Thanks. Thanks.
Yeah.
Thanks.
It takes a lot of courage to do stuff like that. You know what I mean? I was nervous.
Oh, okay.
I was nervous. I was like, what's this man gonna say? He's gonna be like, very cool though. That's awesome.
Yeah.
But yeah, like things like resentments and things like that building up because relationships go on autopilot, community, like, and sometimes you just want to be nice. You
Mm,
interpret it as being nice by not speaking up about your boundaries or concerns and things like that. But it's good to just be vocal and communicate, because if not, these things are probably coming up for a reason, for you, for me, for partnerships and things like that. And left unattended, I feel like the relationships go unattended the people involved have to live with all of these feelings that go uncommunicated. And it's easy. It's just that's why I'm just like we're setting it for once a month so that we don't let them just slip by and them fester in the relationship. So so yeah, do you have any thoughts on that? Have you ever done that with a relationship before and anything like that?
Well, my immediate thought about it, or one of the things that came to mind is, so is there, so like over the, since you're aware that you are, that this conversation is coming up, like mentally, do you kind of like pinpoint, is it like a natural process to where you take notes of like, okay, I want to bring this up at this point? Or you get what I mean? Like, is there a filtration of like, oh, the conversation can be had now? Yeah. What's that gauge of like having a conversation now, or I can bring this up, at the end of the
Mhm.
month or whatever, this 30-day period when we talk.
Yeah, so he kind of called me out a few days ago where when I was reminding him about the dinner, he's like, "Well, is there something you want to talk about today?" And we did end up talking about something kind of big just before we even got to the dinner. He was like, Ray, we don't always need the dinner for you to tell me these things. I was like, "Yeah, but you're having a good day and it makes me nervous and like I don't want you to think that I'm criticizing you or anything like that." And he was like, "No, it's fine and I appreciate you. I know you tell me things because you care about me." So that went well. So obviously we're having conversations throughout our relationship as well, but I think it's good to have the one monthly because I won't say that I'm taking notes, but mentally I do tell myself, okay, is this worth bringing up at this dinner or is this something that maybe I will put off for another date? And so I have been interested in how I am like the criteria I have in my mind of like how concerned I am about something versus how not concerned I am, or how I'm willing to allow something to play out without bringing it up yet, or things that I'm not allowing to play out much longer, not asking for a change right then and there, but more of an awareness like this is coming up for me and I just want to talk about it and things like that. So
Mm.
that's been interesting too, to see what's like important and what's not so important, what I'm willing to like allow and or see how it goes. But yeah, no notes are being taken yet, but it's only month two. You know what I mean? I mean, ask me on month eight if I'm taking notes throughout the month. I'll have this little phone. Some of y'all aren't watching, but I'll probably have 4 monthly meetings and a little checklist on it, maybe. We'll
Gotcha,
see.
gotcha. And so just to be clear, the topic that we're talking about, or the space that we're going into, is the importance, the value of communicating emotions in situations, having difficult conversations. Is that the direction we're going in, or where we're at?
It feels more like the intentionality of relationships because I do like us talking about communities as well and those connections that we foster in those communities. So maybe we can circle back to that too. But also why we walk away. I feel like the true reason why I'm talking about this is like the intentionality and making sure you're checking in with your relationships, whether romantic or anything else, is because if we find ourselves letting go of things or quitting things, it may not always be because that doesn't serve us in our life, but because we didn't find value in our voice in those situations. You know what I mean? Or we kept ignoring our feelings or things like that. That's how I'm feeling. And it just so happened that I think I could have learned from my jujitsu community thing because I realized so many things were festering that at the time I could not talk about it in that space. And sometimes that's okay. Sometimes people aren't going to listen to us and maybe we need to take a step back. Maybe it's not over forever. I treated it like it was over forever. And I think that was valuable. And also I think I could have spoken up a little bit more, So mostly I feel like we're talking about why we really let go of things. Is it because we don't like it or because we didn't speak up and have those hard conversations in those spaces with those people? Does that make sense?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I think in a moment, what um, I want to also leave space for, like, obviously, leaving situations can be, um, there can be a myriad of reasons why people leave situations, and so in this case, again, speaking for myself, I could think of what was coming up for sure. And actually, I had this talk. We had this talk at a talking circle within our community recently. And I remember we were talking about families. And so one person had mentioned previously about being raised to put on a good front. And then so when he was talking about that, what came up for me was in my household, it was kind of somewhat similar, but it was just like it was more along the lines of this is family business. So there was never like an outlet to tell people outside of the family, if I'm putting it in a community context, to talk to people outside of the family unless they were trusted or there was, close bond or were, yeah, we had a close bond about certain issues, or is something right or is it wrong, or should it be this way? Should it not be that way? Does this need to get fixed? Is this train of thought properly? And so even at least in a community component or aspect, yeah, someone brought up therapy and the value of having a third party kind of come in and give that different perspective from the people within the situation. And so, yeah, that's what's kind of coming through for me, is thinking of all the different examples of, or ways to communicate, or ways to bring up something, or even that play between, okay, well, what is right to, what is sufficient to talk about something, or when is it sufficient to talk about something. So I do love and enjoy how sounds like you and your boyfriend have made an agreement that, hey, this is the time that we're going to dedicate to talk about these particular issues, or talking about things that may be difficult, and then kind of allow that to morph and evolve and shift, to benefit the partnership, benefit the relationship, benefit the connection.
Yeah.
And then so the other piece that comes in to mind as well is like you two being on the same wavelength, on the same page, or having that same idea or agreement or commonality of like, yo, we're going to do this for the betterment of our connection, for our partnership. So we're both going to allow ourselves to hear something we may not want to hear, or to share something that may feel discomfort, or be uncomfortable, for the betterment of our partnership, and so that we are successful, and that we do move forward, or we do evolve. And so those are some of the things that we're coming through.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, that's interesting how you bring up the thing with like family and not being able to talk about anything outside the family. That's so interesting to me. Um but and as you were saying that, I was just thinking to myself, what scenarios would I be in that would put pressure on me to do that? And like you said, you might have said it, or I might have inserted this, but like to save face, or what did you call it? What did you call it?
Yeah, something along those lines. I can't remember the exact term he
Yeah.
used, but it was something like that. Yeah, it was something like that.
Yeah, and I
To
do
put
feel
up a
like
good front. I think that was the term
mm,
somebody used, to put up a certain.
yeah.
In his perspective, he called it putting up a front, and I was saying in my upbringing, it was just like, we don't speak publicly about family business. Family business is
Mm,
family business, and so.
yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah, I actually had this conversation with my mom the other day about certain communities that they engage in, or things like that, and why I'm deterred from those communities. And it's because I do feel this pressure of perfection, this pressure to be perceived a certain way, and not to be perceived as someone with mistakes or problems or
Mm.
things like that. I have no interest in being in communities like that, or having relationships like that, or anything. I really gravitate away from that because I just, and not, I mean, I hope that doesn't sound critical to anybody that's listening here. If that's something that you do, for me, it's too heavy. And I find that I've connected a lot with people when I'm very open and honest about problems that I'm experiencing, how many people benefit from hearing those problems, you know? And So yeah, I always feel just very pressured when I have to keep things in a box for only certain people to see. Um, that's just for me how I feel. So,
Yeah. I feel like it's applicable. I mean, that's applicable in partnerships and audience. When I say partnerships, it's just that can be business, it could be educational, it could be intimate, any family partnerships, all of the above. But for sure, that could be that's applicable. I see it being applicable. Um, and like, okay, say two people putting up on the front, or say let's just go with perception, right? So I can easily, or at least nowadays, I have the awareness of when I see a family or I see a couple just walking on the street or out in public or whatever the case may be, I'm aware I don't have the full picture.
mhm,
And so the full picture can also translate to either side. Like if I'm seeing someone or I'm observing, saying, an argument, I'm also aware that there's some beauty in there somewhere.
mm,
Like this argument that they're having, this moment isn't indicative of their entire relationship or experience together. Same way when I see and I perceive someone as, enjoying each moment and got butterflies and this, that, and the third, through my lens and my awareness, that's is just reflective of the moment. I'm
mm,
pretty certain, in this life of duality or existence of duality, there's some hardships and there's some difficult moments or there's some tears and this, that,
yeah,
and the third. And so that again brings up another level, I guess, even in communication, of being aware of the other person's perspective and where they're coming from, even when we're talking about bringing up certain topic and issues. So I guess leading right into it, the importance of um, having awareness of where someone else's might be coming from, or trying to envision, perhaps take into account their full experience that they may be having. So,
mm,
like in this moment, if someone's coming at me in that moment and they might be stern or upset or just say very short or rigid, maybe 10 years ago, I might have, well, even now to a degree. So
mhm,
let me take that back. So even now there's a certain human component of like, I might get on the defensive or I might
mhm,
be reactive or I might even have the knee jerk reaction. I might not say anything in that moment, but then I do try to take into consideration that, hey, well, maybe they had a rough day or maybe
yeah,
they da 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 da, or maybe they, whatever the hell, maybe they just almost got cut off on the road or something. So I guess, like you're saying, that could be opportunity to be like, well, hey, and I'm just using this for example, say, hey, dear, hey, bae, bae is more of a current term. Um, are you okay? Or something like that.
yeah,
And then I can also see, obviously, noticing if it's a repeat thing, like if it happened 3 days in a row, then
mhm,
it is like, wait a minute, we got a problem. you know,
yeah,
I don't. It doesn't matter if they got a problem. I got a problem.
yeah,
So which means we have a problem. But anywho,
right,
um, again, that's just given different scenarios of speaking about the opportunities, and I guess also too to take it back to family as well too. But anywho, I'll cut it off. Well, let me not cut it off. The one reason I share with the audience I'm cutting it off is I'm mindful of a little bit of my speaking from editing some of the videos and the clips. Like, oh, I can ramble sometimes. So let
mm,
me try to be more
okay.
concise and precise with my thoughts.
Yeah, it
And
it gets better over time for sure. But yeah, when you become the editor, it's like wow.
yeah.
Like it is
Uh,
incredible. Yeah.
let me get a little bit more late. Let me laser this thought in a bit. And so yeah, and so with family as well too. While also let me give space for the thought to evolve and come out.
Mhm.
But so when I think about family, it's like, okay, well, when is not right? When is the most efficient opportunity, or at least having that awareness in, or having that same sense of awareness of um, what is the ripple effects
Mm,
of this moment and this conversation and the family dynamics, or even let's go to the parents, me taking into consideration when I'm having a certain conversation, like, oh, some of the stories of how my parents were raised and how their grandparents and their attitudes and
Yeah.
what they had to go through. And so that may not
What
mean
they're
that
still going through.
exactly,
Yeah.
exactly. And so, especially if they haven't like done any self work or healed or haven't taken any time to look at it.
Mhm.
Um, so yeah, I take all that into consideration as well too, or at least make that part of the process of how the conversation comes out. Because
Yeah.
again, I might go to it into it with um, uh, be a little bit more softened if I take all that into consideration.
Yeah. And I think I love how you said that, James. You know, thank you for sharing that. Because, and I also, with that being said, think that's why when he and I sit down, it's actually the way we phrase the questions. And again, these are not my questions. It's what I heard on a podcast and I just took them. It's like, what am I doing well? And what am I doing that you would like more of? Which is
Mhm.
not that I'm never doing it, which sometimes people like to say, well, you never put up your dishes. Like, well, that's a lie. I did that like 3 days this week, but maybe I didn't do it 4. People like to speak in absolutes. So like saying that your partner never does something can be very attacking and they're also questions. They're not statements. We're not just telling each other coming out. Well, they're phrased as questions because I do feel like when we just come out and say certain things, you can get defensive, you know, like you're not leaving room for someone to think about it. And so I think always asking questions instead of being like, you're being like this when you're trying to have a productive conversation. It's like, hey, has something been going on that's been making you feel like this that's caused you to feel snappy? Or like, how are things going at work? Like always start it off with a question when you're dealing with someone that you pretty much are sure that you want to have a relationship with. At least that maybe James says things a little bit different, but that's how I like to do things, especially where I'm wanting to find common ground with someone is always starting off with questions and things like that. So, James, are you paused?
Mm-mm. I
Oh,
was
okay.
listening. I was listening.
You were so still.
Okay.
I don't even think you blinked for like 30 seconds.
Okay.
That
Yeah,
was
no, I'm
funny.
here.
Um, and so yeah, that was oh, and so this could bring up something else too. If you are in situations where you don't feel like you can talk to a friend or to a partner or to community members, things like that. I was worried when I told my boyfriend originally, like he knew from like first, second week, whenever we decided we were going to be in a relationship, he knew before we decided to be official that these meetings were going to happen. And so I've talked to a lot of people in their partnerships and I've gotten a lot of responses that they've never done this before. And to be honest, I've never really had a partner that would do that with me before, but it's very recent that I've decided to do this. And I think going into friendships and relationships, knowing whether you can talk to somebody, like having, I'm not saying that maybe in friendships or whatever, but relationships, if you're finding that lacking in your relationship, if you say things like, hey, I really want to do these check-ins every now and then, and they're like, why? We're going to be fine. I'm like, you live in la la land. You know, these are for when, you know, life is what it is. Even like really good relationships have issues. And to go into things thinking everything's going to be like rainbows and butterflies, I just don't think that that's realistic because personally, I'm not going to be rainbows and butterflies all the time. And that's going to affect the relationship because I'm human, as is the other person. So having these check-ins, it's not always a reflection that the relationship's going awry. It's sometimes to just check in with you as a person and your fluctuating feelings and emotions will always affect a close partnership or any close relationship you have in your life. So, it's kind of sad to me when I've looked back at certain relationships that I haven't been able to communicate effectively in or ask these questions or knew that this wasn't even a possibility. And it's just like, I don't know, it's just sad to think that so many of us are in relationships where we're not we don't feel comfortable to check in with the people that we love and talk to them freely about these things.
Mhm.
So I feel like going into new relationships, if you're like, I mean, family, sometimes it is what it is, but like when you're choosing new friends or new partners, like maybe figure out a way to gauge whether they have the communication skills or the emotional availability to meet you at the level that you want to be at and the communication you want to have in these friendships, relationships, whatever you want to call them, you know?
Mm, mm, mhm.
So,
Cool. Super,
yeah.
super cool.
Is there anything coming up for you, James? What's been happening for you?
Um, I mean, it's a little bit of what you're talking about is again, um, having conversations, but
Mm,
I would more so say it's just really about being clear. At least from again through my lens, as I feel more clear these days, I feel like, um, and I guess one thing to talk about is if we go into relationships, or it's kind of like in the theme of what we're talking about. It's one thing I learned this year, got to experience was uh, considering people outside of my blood family,
mm,
considering them as family. And so often, I know we've talked about this before, and I can't remember if I said this in a previous episode, but I'm usually very hesitant, or there's a filtration time before I use label certain people or certain experiences in my life. And so, like, I might have just met someone, and someone wants to call me brother or sister, and I just met them, and they may say it, and I might say it back at them just to be cordial, or we're responsive or whatever. But in my head, I'll be thinking something else. This person will still feel like a stranger. I'll be like,
yeah.
in my head, I'll still be thinking, I just met you. You know what I mean? Or I
Mhm.
just met this person. And then so it's the same way as like there's a time period or a grace period of, um, if someone is moving from being an acquaintance, does this situation feel more like an acquaintance? Does this person really feel like a friend? Does this person really feel like a family member? So it used to really take me a long time, and I guess it still does to some degree, uh, for me to embrace people, certain roles and responsibilities or interactions in life. And so, perhaps similar to one of the conversations we had in a previous episode, I take my time when engaging with certain people, or opening up to certain people, um, or assessing, okay, is this person responsive enough or responsible enough, even with my feelings, with what I'm sharing. And so, yeah, I would say it takes time to like build that confidence, build that trust, or have certain experiences that grow upon itself. So to go back to what I was originally talking about as well. So I have a community or a group of people who I think we've been in community for about 9 years. No, not 9 years, about 7 years. And so in this particular community, it's not that we hung out all the time, but we saw each other routinely, um, and we would interact and engage in a close manner when we see each other. But when we didn't see each other or we weren't around, there wasn't too much interaction. And so, again, it was a very particular situation where they would be like, "Oh, brother, you're my brother, this, that, and the third." And I'd be like, "Oh, well, you're more like my first cousin." You know what I mean? It's all good when we're around, but when we don't see each other, we don't see each other. So it's not like we're talking on the phone, not like we're going to meet up to have lunch, or going to hang out at the park. So all those things come into play. And this year, it finally clicked. The family feeling finally clicked in, at least on my part,
Mhm.
because we had, over the years in our friendship, we had certain situations. We had bumps in the road, and yet somehow we would still come together, because when we do get together, it is for a common purpose, a common reason, a very strong, um, uh, uh, purpose or intention, purpose higher than ourselves. And so we still come together and work together and be in community and be, in partnership or close connection for this particular reason. And then so what became beneficial is that reason was strong enough to help us navigate the difficult situations. So the
Mhm.
same way, like I was saying before, you and your boyfriend, y'all are aware that you're having these difficult conversations because it's for the greater good of or more, greater benefit of the relationship and the union. Um, Very similarly, I was like, okay, now we are a family because we can work through stuff together. We can
Yeah.
bump heads or have bumps in the roads and work through things together. No, we're not perfect.
Mhm.
And no, we're not, but we are imperfect. And we have this almost like a graceful imperfection to where we are able to, um, again, make it through situations, which to me is a family thing.
Yeah.
Family, and that is not, again, that's not everybody's situation. In my upbringing, I wasn't, we were raised to stick together. We were raised to, again, family business. We were raised to go through things, keep them out shut or vocalize, have arguments, really not talk about, not have arguments. We were raised with so many different rules and principles and guidelines. Half of them I probably don't agree with at this juncture in life. And then half of them, helped raise me. So and helped create who I am today. Um, so yeah, so that was a nice gift this year of like, okay, this is family. And it's just a certain aspect of family. It's that
Yeah.
is that type of family member versus this type of family member. And so
Mhm.
I would say also too that's important even in relationships or partnerships and in having conversations or communication. Again, that aspect of through experience or at least through some sort of clarity, but really through experience, some clarity, at least from my lens, can only come through experience. It's like, okay, this is the type of person I'm dealing with, or this is the type of, partner I have, or this is the type of friend I have. So I'm clear. I'm not going to try to, stretch you too far just because I'm not going to try to, what they call that, fit a square peg into a circle or something like that.
Something like that.
Um, Yeah, so I'm gonna give it space to be like, "Oh, okay, well, I go here, for this purpose and intention, or I go in this direction with this in this situation for this purpose and intention, or I get fed and nurtured in these variety of ways from these variety of situations." Um, Maybe then trying to force it to all come from one direction or come from one
Yeah.
situation.
Yeah.
And so to me, yeah, that kinda help ease up too of like, "Okay, we're good at this thing."
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. And
yeah.
I'm glad you mentioned that because it kind of circles back to what I was saying when I feel things are missing from certain people in my life, it feels like there's a lack of community there. It feels like there is maybe they're looking for in one direction for all the assistance that they need, but they really could benefit from having like a buffet of options, or really trying to lean in and seek out those other communities to feed themselves. Also, one thing I want to point out too, I don't know how we're doing on time, but like I like how you mentioned that going through the hard times actually helps you trust them a little bit more. Where I feel like a lot of times in relationships, people want to skirt around and only like have positive experiences, and if the experience isn't positive and if you're not agreeing all the time, then sometimes we want to lean away from or leave situations where I would have to agree. Like it's when I find like when I can gauge how someone interacts with me when we disagree on something, it tells me a lot about them and a lot about how I can interact with them. And I feel like some of my best friends, we've had some difficult conversations and some of our moments that drew us closer is when we were almost at the brink of like fighting, disagreeing and we came to a very respectful resolution and it's when I think back on these experiences like wow that made our relationship so much better not the opposite. But we're constantly skirting around certain conversations so we don't have to experience that. But then we end up losing people that could potentially be very strong support systems, or just even just friendships. Doesn't always have to be like a pillar in your life, but even like good friends or good communities. But we're so afraid to say things because we're afraid it'll rock the boat or tip the boat over, where in some situations it literally makes it stronger. At least that sounds like what I'm hearing from you as well. Like that's what actually made you feel like someone was an acquaintance versus someone you would consider family, is those tougher conversations, not all the good times in the circles and, oh, we're having a great time. It's when you hit the wall and you're like, oh, how do we deal with hitting walls with each other, you know?
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. I would definitely say in messaging out to the audience as well is at this I view it as both, because I would
Okay.
definitely say like early in life, um, I almost manifested the difficult moments. Like
Yeah.
I didn't put as much value in the pleasure and joyful moments because I didn't trust the joy or the pleasure. I was like,
Mm,
okay, well, let me wait and see when some is this person going to stick to with me through hard times.
yeah.
And so at some point, I had to go through a phase of letting that go, and also putting more energy into the joy and the pleasure. And then now to almost like we talked about with the whole seasons change or life slowing down, to return to come back to a point or spiral to a deeper or greater point of seeing the benefit in both. Like I want to cherish and appreciate the that I can have a good time with this person and that we
Yeah.
can get along, like genuinely, not the fake stuff, not like, oh,
Right.
none of that, but like I'm really enjoying myself around this person and we having a
Yeah.
good time, and also take into consideration and give some emphasis or energy to, okay, how do we navigate difficulty? What is the communication in difficulty? Because, and quite frankly, there are people out there, situations out there where people are stuck on, or situations are stuck in a negative, a union based off of negativity, or based off of
Right.
like depression, or based off of like, and actually one of our um, mutual friends shared this at one point, and she was at work one time, and she realized one of her work friendships was based off of them both not liking their boss.
Mm,
And so every time they got together or every time they interacted, the energy was always, the root of it was always based on not liking the boss. And
mm,
then she was like, well, wait a minute. Are we really friends, or do we just have this one thing in common? And that's all, it's just so one dimensional, or, um, and so forth and so on. But anywho, I'm using that as an example. Uh, Situations can, we can expound in different ways. So yeah, yeah, yeah. So that's one thing for sure, is like a balance of putting a balanced energy, almost like, even when I think about chakras, when I think about chakras, I always think for chakras to be balanced, not overactive and not underactive, but really just nicely balanced. And so that's kind of like my lens right now, is I want to truly appreciate and enjoy the fun, and truly value and grow from the difficulty or the discomfort.
yeah. And I will agree with you on, I almost wanted to ask you when you were talking about these relationships that were basically, I like to call those like relationships based on chaos.
Uh,
There's these pleasure points and these low points, but in order to get back to the pleasure point, you have to manifest a low point.
mm,
There's definitely relationships, and you can't see me on the video. They look like a Richter scale. They looked like you know what a Richter scale is, but just up and down constantly, constantly. And a lot of people have the fights so they can feel the pleasure again, because it's just not
mm,
apparent in the relationship. It's not like pleasure, pleasure, pleasure. Okay, discomfort. Okay, how do we get back to this set point? More like a good calming feeling. And I would say that I've told a lot of people that me and my current partner, we feel like that. And I'm very convinced so many people think, well, I don't want to say it in, I will just say in my past relationship, I thought I was in love, but I was on that Richter scale. I was on the pain, pleasure, pain, pleasure. I have to there's going to be a fight either from that person or me, or something's going to manifest to cause us to be upset so that we can get back up to the pleasure point, and to me that feels like a roller coaster where I will say I tell my boyfriend all the time, I'm like, I've never really experienced this, but this does not feel like a roller coaster. This feels safe, this feels stable, this feels comfortable. And I feel like so many people will lean away. Like I feel like the messaging has been, you shouldn't be comfortable in a relationship. Like people say that and they're like, oh, you must lack passion if you have comfort. And I'm like, you must be stressed out a lot, because back when I wasn't comfortable in a relationship, it was constant stress, insecurity, not speaking my feelings, always having to correct someone, always being either critical vocally or internally all the time.
Mm.
And it was, I mean, I don't know, it's just so different. So that's what I hear when I hear relationships that always enduring difficult moments is, to me, kind of like you said. I mean, you said it. It was like I didn't trust. Did you say you didn't trust the joy?
Yeah, I think I said something like that. Yeah.
Okay, that's really, I mean, that's pretty intense, but I would say I felt the same way too. Like even for him, it was almost like I was a little skeptical. I shared it in another episode that will probably be out before this one. That I thought something was wrong with him because he liked me, and he was very much intensely, like, very open about caring about me. I was like, oh, there's something wrong with him. I even did something nice for him yesterday and I was so nervous to do it. And he was so happy. And all this morning I was like, oh my gosh, he's going to break up with me because I did something really kind for him and said something really nice for him. And the first thing he pretty much texted me this morning was like, oh, I was thinking about what you did. And it made me so happy when I woke up today. And I was like, oh my gosh, I've been stressing out all morning that you're going to break up with me. And I told him that's because when I used to express or do things for people in the past, they were like, oh my gosh, she likes me too much. I need to leave. So I thought he was going to do, my programming. I was fighting it. I kind of knew it wasn't true, but it was nice to hear the reassurance. So it just goes to show, like, we're all bringing these things into, all these relationships, new, old. And I never like to be really exclusive on just a partnership because I think we bring it into friendships. I think we bring it into communities as well. These moments where we've trusted something or we leaned into something, and we bring in the same insecurities, and you're not just healed going into all these relationships. And maybe that's what I'm trying to say. I don't feel healed. I'm just more aware, and I have people that I can discuss these things that are coming up for me with, and it feels so good. And it doesn't always feel like it's pointed at them, that it's their fault I'm experiencing it. Sometimes it's just something that's coming up for me, and I've attracted a lot of really good friends and a partner as well that I can just say it to and not be critical of them, but also be aware of how it's come up for me in the past. And it's just been really nice. People like to phrase it as like baggage, which maybe we do, but we all have that. And I'm glad to just not be in a space anymore where people shame me for having experiences that caused me to feel a lot of pain. And when it gets brought up, I don't blame them, but also they don't see me as somebody that's just broken, because I still have things active in my energy that quite frankly, and this might be a whole nother episode, it may never go away. These experiences that where we've been rejected, shut down, or not heard, this idea that all that just goes away because you do like some meditations or yoga or journaling, I haven't experienced that. I think that the hum gets lower, but there's still a hum, and it still affects me at random moments. So it's just nice to share space with people. It makes me want to cry, that don't push me away for that anymore. Very nice.
Yeah. Actually, the words that's coming through, at least in this episode or in this moment, it is the accept part of the podcast. So it sounds or feels like there's space, having acceptance. So like, say, for instance, even before I got here, I told you when we started, I came from a lunchtime meditation that I just started doing on Mondays. And so it's downtown, it's in a yoga studio, meditation studio, downtown. And so the intention of the space is that so people can like calm their minds like in the middle of the day at their lunch hour on a Monday.
Mm.
And so maybe I might put the link and all that good stuff in the episode at some point, or make it where people can find it and join in, because we'll also do it virtually. So the whole at some point we'll start the virtual piece to where people can log in at lunchtime and have a few minutes to go within. And so
Nice.
one of the things was similar even to the guy with the knocking. I told her just to was to embrace what's happening in the moment. And so
Mhm.
obviously like in meditation, part of or spiritual in the spiritual world or communities, a popular statement is the resistance causes suffering.
Mm.
And so part of the suffering, whether it's emotions or like say for instance, let's go back to the fence. If I had resisted my desire or thought process or urge to go have the conversation with the guy, or the urge to want to have a harmonious recording without hearing a knock, 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 knock for 40 minutes. Um, yeah, I might have been suffering a little bit. I was actually with each knock, there was a little bit of suffer. It was like suffer, boom, and then so
You would have suffered during the editing as well.
I might leave it in there so just for the context of
Oh
what we're
yeah,
talking about.
definitely
Yeah.
for the beginning. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. And then so oh right. Yeah, you're right. I would have been suffering through the editing. So yeah, I was thinking about all that. And so again, like we said, it was important to speak up and accept the emotions or the desire that was coming through in the moment, and be able to have the space or the tools or techniques or whatever, the safe space, let's just call it safe space, to have that conversation, to go have that conversation. I didn't go over there angry. I was glad to see it was a guy, one of the contractors who I had talked to before, and it was just him by himself working on the fence. And he actually wasn't even close to the window. He was like further down. It was just the tools he was using was just so loud, and it was kind of reverbing through by up to this part of the house. And so yeah, he was quite kind and quite thankful to was like, oh, he was like I said, he was like, no problem, man, had a smile and a grin and gave me a fist pound. And so um yeah, having that acceptance, having a space where there is acceptance so conversations can feel safe, or they
Mhm.
can feel at least have some type of harmony or balance to it. Um, in most cases, that's ideally. So, what I would say to the
Mhm.
listeners or audience is maybe making a list or reflecting on who are maybe some of the people or communities or groups of people, places you can go, or that a person can go, to where there is a safe space for dialogue, a safe space to express, or a comfortable space, a space that's comfortable enough to express. It doesn't have to be, feeling like, oh, I'm on cloud nine. There's always gonna be a little bit of difficulty, or resistance. It's a lot less than feeling like, oh, I'm about to walk into a brick house, or a brick wall, that sort of
Mhm.
thing. And because what they call that, emotional intelligence.
Mhm.
It's like it
Mhm.
would be emotionally intelligent for me to walk into a brick wall, the emotional
And
brick wall.
also like don't underestimate your ability to create that space because you didn't go out there yelling. You didn't go out there mean. I think the
Mhm.
way you approached him also mattered a lot as well.
Yeah.
And we can always do our, and that's I think going back to what I mentioned before, asking questions more than just giving out statements when you're trying to express something to someone. Like check in with them, see how they're doing first, before you just start to say, you've been really mean this week. It's like, hey, are you good? Because those are always better ways to de-escalate where someone might already be kind of on edge.
And I would add, ask the questions to oneself also. So
Mm-hmm.
again, like before having a conversation, um, maybe I might check in with myself and be like, okay, do I
Yeah.
really want to have this talk right now? Do I feel like I'm in a space where I could be responsive versus react? Am I on edge? Did I have
Mm-hmm.
a rough day to where it's better for me to wait? Actually, I used to get it, but we don't have to go. We'll say that for another episode. But yeah, just giving oneself space as well too, and doing some internal questions of even going back to like we were talking about, is this a talk that's best to have right now from my end,
Mhm.
or is it, can it wait, or do I feel like it's okay to wait until a different designated point in time?
Mhm.
And so, yeah, so I just want to advocate for that as well too, having those internal questions as well as the external questions.
And a super, and I was debating whether even talking about this because I won't give a lot of details on it. But like me and my boyfriend, we did have a very hard conversation before that dinner. It was hard for me because it was awkward and it was scary, and I was afraid of how he would react. But before I had that conversation, I was like, I did question myself, like, why is this coming up? Is this really his problem? Is it mine? Because it was something that my dad used to do. And I was like, so before I get into this conversation, I want to be clear that some of this could be my story around what I'm seeing about him.
Mm.
And it could actually also be a problem as well. And before I even said it, he told me what he thought it was. And I was like, did I say anything throughout the week to tell you that? He was like, no, you never said anything. I can see why you would think that's a problem. I was like, oh, okay, okay, okay. So, and I told him, I don't expect you to change it overnight. Like, now that we're aware of it, first of all, I just wanted to be able to say that it was starting to make me uncomfortable or that I have past experiences with it.
Mm.
So, and I've had this hard conversation, not with a partner before, but with a friend. And literally once I was able to express like, hey, this is something I'm hyper aware of. It makes me sad. It makes me angry. It makes me frustrated sometimes. I don't know how I'm going to react to you when you do this. Sometimes I might just leave. Sometimes I might just sit there and kind of just think about things or be quiet. But after I expressed it to that friend years ago, I felt relief. And I felt the same relief when it came up with him because I know how long it takes people to change certain habits. They are not overnight. So I felt so much relief just saying, hey, I have a past with this. It really upsets me sometimes. It makes me sad. It makes me concerned. But I just want to let you know. And, he said, okay, and I was like, and now I'm gonna just trust you to navigate it how you see fit. If you change it, great. If you don't, I'll be here and we can, if it still makes me uncomfortable, we'll have another conversation about it. Just know that. But it could be fine. So, problems aren't over the moment you talk about them either. So, just like it was really awkward, but we're still at the stage of our relationship where we're like, we're saying things because we care about each other. So hopefully it stays
Sweet.
that way. And I think intentional conversations and check-ins can facilitate that lasting longer than like the first year, first 2 years, first 3 years, kind of
Yeah,
deal.
yeah. Actually, that might. I'm thinking about it. Well, I was about to say that's probably be the title of this episode: intentional conversation. Having an intentional conversation,
Nice.
uh, potentially. And so, yeah. So, thank you all for listeners again, for being here with us, sharing in this conversation with us, and again listening. Definitely subscribe to the podcast. Look us up on multiple different platforms. We're on TikTok and Instagram and Facebook and Apple Podcast and Spotify. And so, yeah, just listen, subscribe, share. Also feel open to share any thoughts or comments that came up for you during this episode. We'll have our email in the description, or feel open to find our email. I'm sorry, it'll be in the description. I'll edit this part out. Yeah, and email us with any, again, questions, comments, topics, anything you might want to hear us talk about and share. So, thank you all for being here. Anything else? Anything you want to add in there, Ray?
We're good on this end.
Perfect. So another fantabulous episode of the Grace Accepted Vibe podcast. For everybody who's listening, I'm doing 2 peace signs. And we'll see you.
I'm doing one.
We'll see you on the next episode. All right. Till next time.
Bye.
Toodaloo. No,
Toodaloo.